Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. She walked onto the TechBridge stage wearing my blazer, my pitch deck glowing behind her, and said, "I'm the founder of Fenley." I was sitting in the back row, invisible, forgotten. And then I saw my parents' names listed as co-creators. I'm Camilla. I built a startup from scratch. They drained my $500,000 fund, gave it to my sister's music dream, and called me a leech. But this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when you stop asking for permission to exist. Have you ever been erased by the very people who raised you? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your story. I only opened the app because I was waiting for my tea to steep. The water hadn't even cooled when I saw the number, no, the absence of it. My balance wasn't low, it wasn't pending. It was zero, just a blank white screen with 0 and 0 sitting in the center like it had always belonged there. For a moment, I thought I'd opened the wrong account. Maybe I tapped an old card by mistake. I refreshed twice, logged out, logged back in. The result didn't change. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the kettle clicked off behind me. The steam curled into the cold February air, untouched. I called the bank. A woman answered, professional and unfazed. I told her there had to be some mistake. She said, "The funds were transferred 3 days ago, initiated by a joint trustee, Denise Jensen, with supporting authorization from Gerald Jensen. My parents," she continued, "something about proper documentation on file and a scanned signature." I hung up before my voice cracked. The keys were in my hand before I even made a decision. My car started itself, muscle memory guiding me onto wet pavement and past leafless trees all the way to the house I grew up in. Still pristine, still staged like a catalog for family ideals. When I walked in, no one flinched. My mother stood at the kitchen island, slicing a grapefruit into perfect halves. The juice bled slowly onto the cutting board, bright against the white marble. My father sat in his armchair, flipping through the Sunday Times like it was any other day. "You look tense," my mother said without looking up. "You emptied my account." She wiped her hands on a linen towel methodically, like she was cleaning a plate. "Oh, that," she said, as if I'd asked about the weather. "Sweetheart, calm down. We didn't empty it, we reallocated it." "Reallocated it," I repeated, barely recognizing my own voice. Ruby needed a down payment for the studio. The producer wanted commitment up front. She couldn't keep recording in that dusty garage. It's not a good look in the industry. The grapefruit slid quietly into a ceramic bowl. She moved with so much calm it felt staged. My father still didn't speak. "That money wasn't for incense and velvet couches," I said. "It was for Fenley, my company, my work." My mother's sigh landed somewhere between pity and boredom. "Camille, your work is important. It's just behind the curtain. It doesn't move people the way Ruby's does." My fingers curled slightly. I built a platform to help people get out of payday loan traps. I pitched for seed funding. I worked 7 months straight without weekends. "Your sister's music is expressive. It connects. And mine doesn't." "You're the practical one," she said, soft like it was a compliment. "You always figure things out." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Something in me went so still it scared me. I turned and left without slamming the door. The rain was heavier by the time I got home. My apartment felt smaller than usual, like the walls had closed in while I was gone. I sat at my desk but didn't touch the keyboard. My tea had gone cold. The radiator ticked in protest. Then the email arrived, forwarded from my dad's account. Subject: Authorized Transfer Ruby Fund. Attached was a PDF with a scanned form titled Development Budget Allocation. It showed the exact amount, $500,000, moved from my Fenley account into one labeled Creative Growth Fund Ruby Jensen. At the bottom, in perfect cursive, was my signature. Except it wasn't mine. The O in Camille was too round. The J in Jensen dipped left, not right. The cross on the T in my middle initial didn't align the way I always did it when I signed anything legally binding. I stared at it for what felt like a full hour, waiting for it to shift into something less familiar. It never did. I opened the document's metadata. It had been created from my father's desktop. The timestamp was from a week ago when I was in San Francisco pitching to a debt relief nonprofit. They told me I was one of the finalists. I hadn't even been in the state when this form was signed. I leaned back in my chair and looked around my apartment. There were notes still taped to the fridge, color-coded drafts of the presentation I'd revised 15 times. My vision board hung crooked over the couch. One sticky note simply read, "Make them see it." I remembered working late into the night with my old roommate, sketching ideas on napkins. I remembered bringing coffee to every mentor I met just to steal 10 minutes of advice. I remembered thinking that if I just kept being practical, it would all pay off. They didn't invest in me because they thought I'd be okay without it. They didn't invest in me because they never believed I'd make it. And now they'd taken what I built and passed it to someone else like it was a family heirloom, like it was theirs to give. I opened the PDF again. This time I didn't focus on the number or the header or the forged signature. I focused on what it meant. Not that they'd taken from me, but that they'd never seen me. Not really. Not once. I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and sat in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I simply understood something I'd been avoiding for years. To them, I was a means to an end, useful until I wasn't. The room buzzed with voices, tech jargon, and the soft clinking of eco-friendly water bottles. I slipped into the last row at TechBridge, hoodie up, badge tucked into my pocket. No one looked twice at me, just another developer or intern trying to network on the cheap. The stage was sleek, backlit in blue, flanked by banners that read, "Innovate, Disrupt, Scale." The irony almost made me laugh. I hadn't planned to come, not after the email from Finley's admin account. "Your withdrawal request has been processed. We wish you healing." I'd never sent a withdrawal, but I told myself there had been a mix-up. I still held on to that sliver of hope, the irrational kind that lives in the chest of every builder, every founder who's been told no one too many times. So I showed up. I found an empty seat in the back, letting the padded cushion swallow me whole. The lights dimmed. The MC welcomed everyone, made a few awkward jokes, then cued the next presenter. A logo I designed flickered to life on the screen. Except it was different. The fonts were cleaner, the palette cooler, the tagline I'd written condensed into a catchier version. Then she walked out. Ruby. She wore my navy blazer, the one I'd left at my parents' house last month. It still had a coffee stain inside the sleeve, barely visible. She'd paired it with high-waisted trousers and a smirk that said she'd won something. "Hi," she began.
I'm Ruby Jensen.
"I'm here to talk about Finley." My stomach dropped. She moved through the slides with practiced ease, my slides, the customer pain points, the beta user heat map. Even the testimonial quotes were mine, down to the typos I hadn't gotten around to fixing. She'd rebranded everything slightly. Our users instead of my team. The vision we share instead of I wanted to build. She had never wanted to build. She just wanted to arrive at the end of someone else's story and claim it as her first chapter. The crowd leaned in, captivated. A man with a media badge scribbled furiously. Ruby gestured to the screen behind her, where my old metrics lit up in bold colors. Then she said it. "I'm not the numbers person. That's my sister. She's brilliant but prefers to work behind the curtain." People laughed warmly, like it was a sweet inside joke. The woman sitting next to me, maybe in her 40s, leaned toward me slightly and whispered, "Didn't you create this?" I didn't answer. I didn't move. I watched Ruby light up the room like she'd struck gold in her backyard. She was charismatic, well-rehearsed. Even the moments where she pretended to fumble, those self-deprecating pauses, felt timed to a metronome. And the blazer, that was the worst part. She wore it like armor. But for me, it had always been a reminder of pitch days, sleepless weeks, the first yes from a skeptical angel investor. Now it felt like a bruise stretched across her shoulders. Halfway through her talk, I stood up. Not dramatically, not with a huff or stomp, just stood. I walked up the side aisle, careful not to make eye contact with anyone. My shoes thudded softly against the carpet, each step cutting into the sound of Ruby's carefully crafted words. Outside, the air was crisper than I expected. A vendor was selling cinnamon lattes at a cart near the fountain. I thought about getting one. I didn't. By the time I got back to Aunt Laura's place in Eugene, the sun had disappeared. Her porch light was on, soft yellow like it had been waiting for me. She opened the door before I knocked. She didn't ask what happened. Instead, she handed me a cup of tea, her usual blend, chamomile and lemon peel, and draped a quilt over my shoulders before I'd even sat down. I lay on her pull-out couch, eyes fixed on the ceiling crack that ran from the fan to the curtain rod. I traced it with my eyes over and over, like it might spell something different each time. Lorna sat across from me, flipping through a magazine she wasn't reading. She didn't press, just sipped her own tea and let the silence be what it was. I finally spoke, voice low. They took everything. And they didn't even call it theft. Lorna looked up slowly, her face unreadable. They'll call it family, she said softly. They always do. The email landed like a pebble in a still pond. Subject: Founder Equity Transfer. Internal approval. I didn't even open it, just hovered over the preview pane and exhaled. The sender was a dummy alias tied to an old Gmail I hadn't touched since grad school. The email was a forgery. I didn't need to check the metadata. I could smell it now. It was becoming a pattern. When I was 13, my mom had said with a warm chuckle at a PTA meeting, "Camille doesn't need help. She's low maintenance." Back then I smiled, thinking it meant I was mature. But now, in Aunt Lorna's den, surrounded by legal pads and open Dropbox folders, I finally decoded it. Low maintenance meant disposable, easy to step over. I sat cross-legged on the floor, notes spread like a crime scene. There was no rage anymore, just something colder, quieter, more methodical. The kind of energy that doesn't shout, doesn't storm, but logs every detail like evidence. Because that's what it was now, evidence. I opened another folder, the one labeled Finley Archive 2021. Each file flicked open with a soft click. Slides, drafts, emails, term sheets. My cursor moved faster than my thoughts. Old pitch decks, user surveys I'd conducted myself, investor intro letters, all time-stamped, all mine. One document caught my eye. Exit Agreement Jensen PDF. I'd never written it, never signed it, but there it was, complete with my name, my digital signature, and a date that matched a time I was offline camping with Lorna in the Cascades. They hadn't even tried to cover their tracks. That was the part that hurt most, the carelessness. Lorna stepped in, holding a mug of tea that smelled like lavender and something citrusy. She didn't say anything, just sat it beside me and walked out. But she came back a few minutes later, holding a thick folder. "These are yours," she said simply. I opened it slowly. Inside were old business cards, workshop feedback sheets, scratched up post-it notes with contact names, notes from my first pitch at the university startup lab, a draft of the original equity split long before Ruby was even interested. "You kept all this?" Lorna shrugged. "You forget I listen." I didn't say anything. I stared at the pages like they might breathe. By midnight, the spreadsheet was alive. 3 tabs color-coded and itemized. Tab 1, what they took. Tab 2, what I have. Tab 3, what they don't know yet. It wasn't rage, it was restoration. I typed slowly, deliberately, each keystroke steady. Under what they took, I listed $500,000, brand identity, early media leads, seed stage relationships. Under what I have, original pitch files, old backups, first-hand email threads, Lorna's archive. The third tab was growing fast. Screenshots, metadata pulls, revision histories, all with date stamps. Then I drafted the first cease and desist notice. It wasn't dramatic. It was formatted like any standard legal document. I attached the forged files and a list of confirmed discrepancies with digital trail links. I addressed it formally to Denise Jensen and Gerald Jensen. Trina Bowen replied within the hour. Subject: Re-urgent review equity misrepresentation. Body: you don't just have a case, you have receipts. Let's use them wisely. The words settled over me like a weighted blanket. My phone buzzed. Voicemail from Denise. Her voice had that familiar softness coated in concern but hollow underneath. "Sweetheart, don't be difficult. Ruby's doing well, but she needs something solid. Maybe just a small share of Finley, 10%, nothing drastic. We're still a family. Let's keep this civil." Civil, as if they hadn't rewritten me out of my own life. 5 minutes later, another voicemail. This one from Gerald. "You're being emotional, Camille. We all made Finley what it is. Don't ruin the momentum because you feel excluded." Feel excluded? I hit replay just to hear it again. Not excluded, just feel. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. Instead, I copied the voicemails into my notes, transcribed them, labeled each one. Then I sent the cease and desist package to their emails. One copy to Trina, another to our old family lawyer just for record. This wasn't vengeance, it was clarity. I paused to sip the tea. It had cooled, but the lavender still lingered. Marcus Lee, Finley CTO. Texted as I was shutting down my laptop. Hey, getting weird vibes from the board. Everyone's asking who's leading. You okay? I typed. Not yet, but getting there. Then I deleted his number. I turned off the lights in the den and stood in the quiet. Lorna had gone to bed. The clock on the wall ticked with gentle rhythm, anchoring the moment. They'd always taught me to be polite, to stay even-keeled, to maintain peace. But I finally understood. Peace without justice, that's just permission, and I wasn't giving it anymore. The article began with a photo of my parents seated on a leather couch, sunlight catching the rim of my father's glasses. The headline read, "Visionary co-founders behind Finley's rise." I wasn't angry when I saw it. Not at first, just cold, like someone had cracked a window inside me and let in a draft I hadn't braced for. The journalist called them the quiet architects of modern fintech, praised their decades of wisdom and unwavering support for their daughter's creative vision. They meant Ruby, not me. My name appeared once, buried in the 5th paragraph. It read, Camille Jensen, who offered early technical support during Finley's inception. Support as if I plugged in a few cables then wandered off. Outside, the late summer light spilled across Aunt Lorna's porch, dappling the wooden panels. The lavender in her planter boxes swayed gently, scenting the breeze with calm I couldn't yet claim. I closed the laptop, then opened it again. Maybe I had read it wrong. I hadn't. The next email hit harder, forwarded from an address I didn't recognize but tied to an old Gmail I'd used in undergrad. Subject: Camille Jensen official resignation. I stared at the body of the message. I, Camille Jensen, am stepping down from all roles at Finley effective immediately. Due to ongoing emotional instability and personal burnout, I will no longer participate in company operations. I hadn't written those words, but they sounded like the version of me my parents had always preferred. Fragile, retreating, self-silencing. The email header showed the IP address it was sent from. I ran a trace. It led back to my parents' home Wi-Fi network. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I opened my Dropbox, my pitch drafts, my investor call logs. I started building something far more powerful than rage. A timeline. That afternoon, Lorna walked out with a manila folder in her hand. Found this in the linen drawer, she said casually. I keep things in weird places. Inside, printed investor notes from 2021, rubrics from startup competitions, even a handwritten card from an early advisor congratulating me on an idea that could change lives. Things I thought I'd lost, or maybe things I'd been made to believe were never mine to keep. Lorna didn't say much. She set the folder down, poured me a glass of iced tea, and returned to her crossword on the porch. That was her way. Support without spectacle. I moved to the kitchen table and began sorting, one document at a time, one thread after another. I opened a blank page on my personal website. Simple font, white background, no photos, just a headline. I did not resign. I was overwritten. Below it I wrote, I didn't leave my company. I was removed from it digitally, emotionally, publicly. I didn't burn out, I was buried. For those asking, here's the truth. Timeline, receipts, voice. Not a spectacle, a record. I attached a PDF labeled Finley Original Founder Timeline PDF, dated pitch decks, emails, screenshots of early Slack logs. I didn't editorialize. I just let the facts speak. I hit publish and closed the laptop. By the time the sun dipped behind the neighbor's cedar tree, the post had 3,000 views. By the next morning, 37,000. The hashtag SheBuiltFinley was suddenly everywhere. On Twitter, LinkedIn, old Reddit threads. Mentors reposted our early accelerator photos. A beta tester uploaded a screenshot of my first product email, timestamped. Even a journalist I didn't recognize retweeted my link with the caption, "This is what stolen looks like." My phone buzzed. "Trina, you ready to go loud?" she asked. I already did. "Camille, this is coordinated identity theft. You're not just recovering your name. You're exposing their entire strategy." I didn't answer immediately. I was still watching the comments roll in. She's the real founder. They tried to erase her. Where was this article before? Rewrite the narrative. Then came an email from the journalist who had written the puff piece that started it all. Subject: requesting comment. Your version. I stared at it, then clicked. "Hi Camille, I've read your post. I'd like to talk." I realize now that I relied too heavily on what your parents and sister provided. That was a failure in judgment. If you're open to it, I'd like to hear your side fully. No spin, just story. Let me know. Evan. I closed the message without replying. The sunlight filtered through the kitchen blinds, casting soft lines across the tile. Lorna was outside watering herbs, humming something I couldn't place. I took a sip of tea, cold now, and stared out the window. They forgot me. They didn't kill my name, they just buried it. But here's the thing about being buried. Sometimes it's how seeds begin. I didn't want revenge, I wanted receipts. And now I had a binder full. Trina handed it to me that morning outside the courthouse, her expression unreadable beneath the fall fog that had settled over Portland like a second sky. She wore a dark blazer, boots that meant business, and a calm so sharp it could slice clean through a lie. I followed her up the stone steps, each one echoing more than the last. The building loomed not because it was tall but because of what it meant. The clerk called our case. Courtroom 4B, civil hearing. I stepped inside and was hit by a sterile coldness, the kind that doesn't belong to weather, the kind born from polished wood, 2 white lights, and the hush of consequences waiting to unfold. Ruby was already seated at the defendant's table. She wore a tailored white blazer, hair pinned, eyes too still. She looked like someone trying to cosplay a CEO from a Forbes spread. On either side of her sat Denise with her pearls, Gerald with a silk tie and the same vague confidence he wore to every parent-teacher conference. I didn't look at them. I sat down beside Trina and opened the binder. The judge, a woman with silver hair and eyes that didn't blink unless necessary, took her seat. She didn't waste time. Miss Bowen, proceed. Trina stood poised like a blade. Your Honor, we'll begin with Exhibit A. An email submitted as Camille Jensen's resignation. It was sent from a Gmail account linked to a router at the Jensen residence. Attached is the IP trace, device log, and a digital signature match. Miss Jensen did not send this email. She clicked her remote. Slide 1 appeared on the screen. Headers, timestamps, login locations. Slide 2. The PDF resignation file. Slide 3. Comparison of signature overlays, mine and theirs. The curve in the J, the loop in the C not matching. Trina didn't rush. She let the silence do the talking between each click. Next came Exhibit D. A document transferring 35% of Finley's founding equity to Ruby's brand division. Again, metadata showed it originated from Gerald's desktop computer, created while I was out of state. Slide 7, side-by-side screenshots of Ruby's TechBridge presentation and my original pitch deck. Identical slide structures. Even the customer personas hadn't changed, just new stock photos and a slightly altered font. Ruby shifted in her seat. Her fingers twitched once, then went still again. Trina clicked to slide 13. Your Honor, this is the turning point. The courtroom lights caught on the screen as a security cam still appeared. My hallway at Aunt Laura's house. The timestamp read 2 weeks before the pitch event. It showed Ruby entering quietly. She wasn't stealing, not in the traditional sense. She wasn't taking money. She was photographing papers, notes, drafts, my equity plan, my investor list. The judge didn't react visibly, but I saw the shift. A tightening of the mouth, a glance down at her own notes. Miss Bowen, the judge said, do you have witness statements to corroborate the chain of authorship? We do. Signed affidavits from beta testers, mentors, and early advisors confirming Camille Jensen as the original and sole founder. Trina sat down. The room stayed still for a beat. Then my father stood. This is all a misunderstanding, he said smoothly. We're a family. We may have made mistakes, but we built Finley together. Camille has always been brilliant, but she doesn't always know when to share credit. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to Ruby. She stood, visibly breathing in before speaking. I didn't mean to take anything, she began, her voice quivering just enough. It all happened fast. I was under so much pressure. People told me I needed a story that moved investors, and Camille was always in the background. I thought I was helping give her work a voice. Tears welled in her eyes. Trina didn't flinch. Miss Jensen, the judge said, addressing me at last. Do you wish to speak? I stood. No, I said. My work has already spoken. She nodded. Then, after a pause, delivered the ruling. This court finds in favor of Camille Jensen. Full ownership of Finley shall be returned to the plaintiff. Ruby Jensen is prohibited from presenting herself as co-founder in any legal business or media capacity. Denise and Gerald Jensen are to pay restitution for intentional interference and misrepresentation. She closed the file. This court considers the actions malicious. Judgment entered. No one moved. Ruby's mouth was slightly open, like she'd forgotten how to form denial. My mother reached for her necklace, fingers trembling. My father stared straight ahead, jaw tight. I didn't cry, I didn't cheer. I walked past them without looking. Outside, the fog had lifted. The courthouse steps were slick from earlier drizzle. Aunt Lorna was waiting by the bench, 2 steaming cups in her hands. "Camille," she said, holding one out. "And they forgot the sugar, but I figured you wouldn't mind." I took the 13's going viral, she added casually. Someone turned it into a meme. The caption says, "When your receipts hit harder than your sister's tears." I let out a soft laugh, my first in weeks. We sat in silence, letting the steam rise into the crisp air. "I thought I'd feel more," I said quietly. "You will," Lorna replied. "But first you rest." And for the first time in a long time, I let her be right. The message was short, just a single line from my mother. "The table will be set by 6. No apology, no mention of the lawsuit, not even a question, just an invitation, like everything was fine. Like we hadn't stood on opposite sides of a courtroom. Like they hadn't called me unstable. Erased me. Signed my name to a future that didn't include me. I didn't reply. Instead, I drafted something of my own. It was an invoice. Simple font, clean lines, 3 pages. Line item 1. Legal fees for civil restitution hearings. Line item 2. Public relations recovery post-defamation. Line item 3. Emotional damage, $0. Because you can't bill people for what they never believed they caused. I added a subject line. Balance due, please remit in silence. And then I sent it. Later that day, I sat in my office in Seattle, my new one. The windows stretched tall, the light clean and quiet. On the wall beside the entry, a brushed steel plaque read, "Finley founded by Camille Jensen." I ran my fingers across the letters. They felt cool, solid, mine. A few desks away, someone laughed softly over lunch. I didn't interrupt. The company didn't need speeches today. It just needed work. Steady, real, and unfabricated. That evening, I walked home through light snow. My apartment was warm, scented faintly with cinnamon and lemon balm from a candle Lorna had brought on her last visit. I poured tea and sat by the window with a blanket across my knees. The invitation still sat in my inbox, unopened, unimportant. Instead, I opened my journal. Just as I was about to write, my phone buzzed. A podcast producer, one of those business shows that usually fawned over brother teams and founder families, they wanted to talk. I told them yes, but only if I set the rules. No gotcha questions. No retellings of Ruby's version. The host leaned in at the end of the recording and asked softly, "Do you forgive them?" I let the silence hold for a second longer than comfortable. "Forgiveness requires truth," I said. "They never gave me any." The episode aired 2 days later. It wasn't viral because it was messy. It spread because it was measured, quiet, calm, like a person telling her truth without asking for applause. On the morning Finley's new HQ opened, there were no cameras, no ribbon, just Lorna beside me. One hand on her cane, the other holding her tea. She didn't say anything when I unlocked the doors. She didn't have to. Inside, the hum of computers starting up filled the silence. A soft, steady rhythm. A beginning, not a parade. That night on my walk home, I passed an old music shop. Its posters were yellowed, curled at the corners. One caught my eye. Ruby grinning mid-spin, her name scrolled in gold font. A little girl pointed. "Mom, who's that?" The woman barely glanced. "Someone who used to be famous," she replied. I didn't stop walking, but I did smile. At home, I opened my journal and wrote, "They called me a leech. I became a builder. I lost my family, but I found something better myself. This time, I'm the one who writes the story. Sign never yours. They called me a leech. Now my name is on the door. My voice is on the record. And the silence no longer belongs to them. Sometimes family doesn't break you with shouting. It breaks you with forgetting. But there's power in remembering who you are. Even when those closest try to rewrite it. In this life, dignity isn't something we ask for. It's something we rebuild, one choice, one truth, one boundary at a time. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll share your thoughts. Maybe you too have walked away, not out of anger but out of clarity.